This isn't the kind of story you tell to pass the time. It's the kind you bury deep, hoping it never resurfaces. Yet here I am, telling it to you, not because I want to, but because I have to. Love often masks the truth. It paints over cracks, hiding what lurks just out of sight. When I met her, I thought I'd found something rare, something extraordinary. And I had, but not in the way I expected. My best friend Jason used to say, "Trust is everything." He believed in people. He believed in me. Until one night when he learned something I wasn't ready to face. He saw her without her face. I married a woman whose face doesn't belong to her. She wears it like a mask, a perfect disguise. And I never asked what was underneath. But Jason couldn't resist looking. And now he can't tell me what he saw. Some secrets stay hidden for a reason. But Jason didn't believe that. He wanted the truth. And now, I'm left to piece together the fragments of his shattered mind, hoping to understand what he saw, and fearing the day I might see it too. It was our third date. You know the kind. The air charged with unspoken expectations, every small gesture magnified. We'd just reached that place where silence isn't awkward, where you can let your guard down. Or at least, that's what I thought. I decided to kiss her, a small, simple act that could change everything, or so I believed at the time. But just as I moved in, she stopped me. There's something you need to know before we go further. I braced myself. Was it the usual? I'm not ready. It's not you, it's me. Instead, what came out of her mouth didn't catch me off guard. It froze me. I have a removable face. She said it casually, like admitting to a food allergy or a strange hobby. For a moment, I thought it was a joke. I waited for her to laugh, to say, "Just kidding," but she didn't. It's not a disease. It's not dangerous. It's just me. But there's one thing you need to understand. You can never, ever see what's underneath. She said it like asking me to respect her privacy or ignore a scar. It wasn't a request. It was a rule. Non-negotiable. I wanted to ask 100 questions, maybe 1,000. How? Why? What did she mean by removable? But all I could think about was the ultimatum she'd given me. If that's a deal breaker, I understand. You should leave now. I'm not going anywhere. I didn't leave. I told myself it didn't matter. That love was about accepting someone, flaws and all. But deep down, I knew this wasn't about flaws. This was something else entirely. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I convinced myself it was just her way of testing me. Maybe one day, she'd tell me it was all a joke. But the truth was already creeping in, clawing at the edges of my mind. We got married in the kind of ceremony people dream about. The sun shone just right, the vows were heartfelt, and for a moment, everything felt normal. She was perfect in every way, or so I told myself. But life at night was different. Every evening, like clockwork, Alice would excuse herself. She'd disappear into the bathroom and lock the door. She called it cleaning her face. She never explained what that meant, and I wasn't allowed to ask. I tried to ignore it at first. Love is about trust. But I wondered as the nights turned into weeks and the weeks into months. What was she doing in there? What was she hiding? During the day, she was a woman I fell in love with, kind, funny, effortless in her charm. But at night, that door separated us. And with every passing evening, my curiosity became harder to suppress. There was a rule, her only rule. I was never to open that door, never to look inside. And for a while I obeyed, but the questions wouldn't leave me alone. What could be so terrible that she'd go to such lengths to hide it? Sometimes, I thought I could hear things, noises that didn't belong. Not just water or the sound of a towel being wrung out, but something else. Scraping, maybe, or tearing. Once, I swore I heard her humming, but the melody was off like it didn't belong to this world. Still, I didn't look. I convinced myself it was better not to know. After all, what if it was something I couldn't unsee? What if knowing changed the way I felt about her? And then Jason came to visit. I hadn't seen him in years and thought his presence might pull me out of my head. I thought it would help, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Jason noticed right away. He wasn't the type to miss things. "What's with the locked bathroom?" he asked, his tone playful but probing. I brushed it off and said it was nothing, but I could tell he didn't buy it. I should have warned him. I should have told him not to ask questions or to go near that door, but I didn't. And by the time I realized what he was doing, it was too late. I heard the door open. I heard him go inside. And then I heard the sound that would haunt me forever. Tom always had a way of getting under my skin. He was blunt, almost to a fault, and had no patience for ambiguity. At my bachelor party that night, he asked the question I'd been dreading. "So, what's under there?" I told him the truth, or at least the version I'd rehearsed. I told him it didn't matter. I loved her for who she was, not for what she might be hiding. But Tom wasn't convinced. How can you marry someone without knowing who they are? I mean, come on. Wouldn't you want to take a look? Just once? I brushed him off and told him it was a ridiculous question. But his words stuck with me. Even after we'd moved on to other topics, I couldn't stop hearing him. "Wouldn't you want to take a look?" I told myself he didn't understand. He couldn't. But deep down, I knew he was voicing something I'd buried, a question I'd never asked myself, because I was afraid of the answer. It had been years since that conversation on the cliffs. By then, Tom and Alice had become friends, or at least as close as Alice allowed anyone to get. But I could tell he hadn't forgotten. Alice excused herself, saying it was time to clean her face. She said it casually, the way you'd mention brushing your teeth or washing your hands. Tom raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. Not yet. I should have known better. I should have seen it coming. But I was distracted and caught up in the call. By the time I came back, the damage was done. I didn't see him go inside. I didn't see him standing at the base of the stairs, looking up toward the bathroom door. But I can imagine it now, clear as day. His curiosity had finally gotten the better of him. He couldn't resist. He told me later that it was a sound that drew him in, that it didn't sound like water at all. He said it sounded alive. When I found him, the door was wide open. The bathroom was empty. No sign of Alice. No sign of anything. Just Tom, sitting on the floor, his back against the wall, shaking uncontrollably. He wouldn't speak. Not at first. When he finally did, the words didn't make sense. He kept saying the same thing over and over. "It's not a face. It's not a face." I tried to ask him what he saw, but he couldn't answer. He just kept shaking his head, muttering, rocking back and forth. Whatever he'd seen in that room, it had broken something inside him. The scream wasn't human. It was primal and raw, cutting through me like a blade. My phone slipped from my hand before I even realized it. Then I heard another sound, Tom's voice, which wasn't a scream. It was a wail, guttural and choking as if his very soul were being torn apart. I don't remember running inside. I don't remember throwing open the door. All I remember is the sound, those screams, those horrible, overlapping screams, and the pounding of my heart in my ears. The bathroom door was open, wide open. The light spilled into the hallway, but it wasn't normal. It was flickering uneven and casting shadows that didn't make sense. And the sounds, God, the sounds. I stepped forward, and that's when I saw him. Tom was stumbling out of the bathroom, his hands clawing at his face, blood streaming down from his eyes. He was clutching something small, a paperclip, and before I could stop him, he drove it into his flesh. Tom wasn't screaming anymore. He was gasping, muttering something under his breath, but I couldn't make out the words. Then I heard her call an ambulance. He looked. Oh, God, he looked. Her face was wrong. I don't know how else to describe it. It was like seeing a painting hung crooked on the wall, a detail so small yet so glaring that it made your stomach churn. And her eyes, they weren't just panicked. They were empty. I called for help, but even as I spoke to the dispatcher, my mind was racing. What had Tom seen? What had driven him to do this? I wanted to ask Alice, but every time I looked at her, all I could see was that crooked face. The paramedics said Tom had lost a lot of blood. They didn't ask questions. They just did their job and left. But as they closed the ambulance doors, I saw him. His lips were moving, forming the same words repeatedly. Later, I realized what he'd been saying. The same words he'd muttered the first time after he looked. It's not a face. It's not a face. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I kept replaying the scene in my head. The blood, the screams, the look on Alice's face when she yelled at me to call for help. But there was something else I hadn't noticed at first. The bathroom door had been open, but Alice was standing in front of it when I got there. If Tom had seen something, it wasn't in the room. It was her. Tom survived, but just barely. The doctor said he was lucky to make it, though I'm not sure anyone would call it lucky. He's blind now. Whatever he saw that night took more than his sight. It took his mind. He doesn't speak in sentences anymore, just fragments. Words that don't fit together like pieces of different puzzles. But one phrase keeps coming back over and over again. It's not a face. I hear it in my dreams now, whispered in the dark. And Alice? She hasn't been the same since that night. She doesn't talk about it, but I can see it in her eyes, in how she avoids mirrors and flinches when I touch her. Whatever happened in that bathroom broke something inside her, too. She blames herself. She says she should have locked the door and stopped him from looking. I tell her it wasn't her fault, but she doesn't believe me. And the truth is, neither do I. I've tried to let it go, to move on, but I can't. Every time I pass that door, I feel it pulling at me, whispering to me. What did Tom see? What did Alice try so hard to hide? What could be so terrible about her real face? I've started dreaming about it. In my dreams, I'm standing in front of the bathroom mirror. I see my reflection, but it's not me. It's something else, something wearing my face, just like Alice wears hers. And then the mirror cracks and I wake up. Some nights, I find myself standing outside that door without even realizing it. My hand on the knob, my heart pounding. It would be so easy to turn it, to step inside, and finally know the truth. But something always stops me. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's sanity clinging to its last thread. Or maybe it's something else. Something warning me that some doors aren't meant to be opened. I used to think love could conquer anything. That no secret was too big, no truth too terrible. But now I know better. Some secrets aren't meant to be uncovered. Some faces should never be seen. I still love her. I think I always will. But every day, I wonder how long I can keep pretending not to notice the seams. And every night, I pray that I never see what's underneath, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once you know the truth, you'll never be the same. Tom can't look anymore. Whatever he saw in that bathroom took that from him, and so much more. Alice, she won't talk about it, but sometimes I catch her staring at her reflection, as if she's afraid it might shatter. And me? I've spent every day trying to forget, but the truth is, forgetting isn't possible. Not anymore. Because once you stand at the edge of the unknown, it doesn't let you walk away unmarked. I know you're thinking about it, wondering what you'd do. Would you resist the urge? Or would curiosity pull you in, like it did to Tom? After all, how dangerous could a single look be? It's easy to say you wouldn't, that you'd walk away. But in the quiet, when no one's around to stop you, could you? Could anyone? Do you think you could resist? Or would you look? Tell me, what would you do? Let me know in the comments below. Maybe you think you're safe, that this is just a story. But remember, sometimes the scariest things aren't the monsters you see, but the ones you'll never see. Subscribe for more chilling tales. Turn off the lights and sleep if you can.